This is the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we teach you the proven methods to grow your seven-figure business to 10 million and beyond. Please welcome your host, Brett Gilliland.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast. As you know, I get to bring exciting guests every single week to spend some time with me talking about typically their own seven-figure growth journey, and today's guest is no exception. Damien Sanchez is a multiple business owner, if that's the right way to say it. He owns a Mosquito Squad franchise in the greater DC area. He's also co-founder of a company called Sterling Lighting, and they provide lighting products and solutions for the outdoor lighting industry. And so, Damien's involved in other things as well, but we'll leave it at that for now. Damien, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. We've known each other for quite some time now. I didn't do the math before this, but I remember way back when we first met, your Mosquito Squad franchise had passed that seven-figure mark, and I got to know you and Pat, your co-founder for Sterling Lighting. And between those two businesses, I think you were trying to figure out how to take them to the next level. And that's when we met.
It is. It's, because you were working for Infusionsoft, and like we had just signed up like in 2011 for, it was actually the year we hit $1 million in my franchise. And, funny to think about it, in 2011, but from 2010 to 2011 was like the transition time of when I was like using paper as a CRM. Like I had files, I had file cabinets, and we had like 1,000 customers, and it was a mess just because whenever we would document things, we'd be pulling a file, and I had tons of people. And that's when we kind of switched over to using a CRM and going online. That we were able to finally streamline and kind of hit the $1 million mark. And, we got to do some interviews with Clayton, you, and for Infusionsoft. And then later I signed up for, because I think I had gotten to about $2 million in gross sales by 2014 in the mosquito control company. And we were just struggling. It was just rapid growth. I knew I was a bottleneck, and I just didn't know what to do. And that's where I'd signed up or actually, I don't remember if it was you and Clay, but I think you guys were up there at Icon talking about this thing called Elite Forum and how it was going to be like life-changing. And you had some people come up there. I'm like, all right, I have to do this because I have no idea what I was doing. And it was a great, a great move on our part to get started with that and just really start pushing towards, that $3 million mark.
Well, this isn't intended to be, a plug for Elite. We'll leave that aside for a minute, but let's talk about some of the things you were experiencing at that time. So I love the evolution. You're sort of growing up in terms of the systems with the CRM, and then you get to 2 million in revenue. And you personally, as the leader, as the owner of that mosquito franchise, that mosquito control, I got to use the word control. It's not like you're out there producing mosquitoes, right? You're out there preventing them. Mosquito control franchise, you were starting to hit some limits for yourself personally. And yes. I don't want to drag you through some unnecessary pain here, but can you remember what that was like for you as the owner trying to keep all that going yourself? Why don't you paint a picture for us?
So we hit, I think our first year, like it was me, and I think I did $67,000 in my first year. And then, we ended up more than doubling that, did 180 the next year, 500 and something the following year. And then I think that was 2011, then we hit 1 million. And, it was, it was very exciting, but even through that stage, it was like, I would hire people and I would lose them. And then just because we're growing so fast, the job is changing. And like, everybody's like, I don't have a job description. I was like, I don't even know what I need you to do, but I just need you to be productive. And so figure it out. And, we I think at the time, it was like, everything was happening so fast, like, I think we had one core value, and it was just like, get by. So whatever we could do, just get by, and which, I mean, we did, but that's not the best way. That's not the culture you really want to cultivate. And then on top of all that, like in 2011, Patrick and I decided to start a lighting control company, or a lighting manufacturing company. And, I had started working with Patrick in 2006 doing outdoor lighting designs in my spare time, because I used to be a full-time firefighter. And it was, as him and I went through that and I did that, we just realized like, hey, it's like there's some pain points when it comes to installing lighting on, we could probably go source some of these lights and, maybe start doing a little designing. And so we did that. We tried to start a co-op, and that was a disaster. And just, everybody wanted us to be responsible for the, for the products. And we're like, hey, this is a co-op. And so that was just a bad idea. And then we kind of pivoted into actually, sourcing lighting fixtures. And then we started making incremental designs, and ultimately, started inventing, this thing that we call a dedicated LED fixture, to really solve a pain point for outdoor lighting designers and installers. So all that's happening in 2011. We hit the $1 million mark in Mosquito Squad franchise 2011, and then 2013 and 14, it really was painful, because as soon as we set up a system or a process, we would outgrow it. And at the time, the franchise system was really young. I think I was like the 9th franchisee to buy into the system, and so really didn't have any kind of support. So I had to figure all that out myself when it came to systems. And, everything would break in real time, and we're trying to fix it and hiring people and then firing people and people quitting. And it was just, those were probably my wife, like, to kind of put you where I was at. Like, I remember we had a conversation in the kitchen, and she's just crying because I work full time as a firefighter. We started a new company, Sterling Lighting. And I've got the existing company, and I've got 2 managers in place that don't like each other. And she's crying at me and going like, I feel like I'm a single mom. I was working like 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week sometimes, just between my shift and going to the office. It was just very stressful.
Well, I like hearing you talk about that in terms of that being a time long ago, right?
Yes.
Like in the past. So yeah. I don't know if this is too personal a question, but have you had any of those kitchen conversations with your wife in the last couple of years, or like, are you beyond that part in your life?
Yeah, no, we have been extremely blessed. Like it took me, I mean, I know I had that conversation with you, like I think by 2016 was when I first hit $3 million in sales. I had, up to that point, hadn't pulled any money out, hadn't done anything. I retired from the fire department, like July of 2015. Finally said, all right, I took Michelle and the kids. We did like a month-long tour, like driving tour around the country. I think we even stopped by and saw you guys while we were doing the tour. And, and that was kind of nice, because that was the first time I was able to step back away from the business and just let everybody else, just like, you guys deal with this, figure it out, get it, and nothing broke while I was gone. I was gone for like 32 days. And, when I left the fire department, it finally freed up my full time. So now I had my full attention on the business. And by 2016, I think we went from 2.2 to 3 million in 2016 it's funny, I had a meeting with Clay Mask, and, I had an hour of his time, and he's just like, you need to learn to say no, or else you're going to say no to the things that you love unless you're intentional about what you say no to. Oh, because then there was also, like, in that 2012 time period, we started a Christmas lighting company. So, and then in 2016, it's like I had also started doing real estate. So I had like 10 rental houses and all kinds of stuff. And, and then by I think it was like middle of 2017. I was doing some cash flow planning, and I'm like looking at it and I'm recrunching the numbers, and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to run out of money before the end of the year unless I make some drastic changes. And so it's like, I was just anything I could cancel, I canceled, and just started trying to implement a plan to sell real estate and downsize, which, long story to get to, hey, have you and your wife had any of these kitchen conversations? Like my goal is just like, I need to get rid of these spinning plates. And so I just started reducing everything, decided I was like, all right, I'm selling my house. I'm selling like our commercial property, and we're moving to Puerto Rico. And so
we're actually talking right now. You're in Puerto Rico, right?
I'm in Puerto Rico right now. Yeah. So by 2018, so it took me like, I had to get the ship righted in 6 months in 2017. I think I ended the year with like $42,000 in cash in my account, by making all the cuts. I cut all my employees' pay by 10%, felt really bad. I cut my pay by 50%, and just, got through it, and then started to kind of realize it. And eventually I did go back. Once I started getting money, I paid everybody back whatever it is I had cut from them. But it was just like, it was super stressful. And, 2018, I started getting my bearings back. And in spite of all that, like, 2018, I think I did have a dip. Like we kind of hit that $3 million threshold, dropped in 2017, kind of went back above 3 million, 2018. And, 2019 finally started to right the ship and start to grow again. But in that process, there's like my attention. I was like, all right, sell this house. I'm selling my personal house. And then we bought a house in Puerto Rico. And, and since then, like, the business, like growth wise on the mosquito control business has stabilized, and we've had, consistent growth, but it's nothing crazy. And which is to a certain degree intentional, because as my managers in that business have grown and their capabilities really do manage everything, which has allowed me then to focus my full time on growth of Sterling. Of course, with Patrick, it's like he's more of kind of the CEO, and I'm like COO, and just figuring out like, all right, how are we going to do this? And it's just been an exciting ride. But like the amount of spinning plates that I have in the year have been drastically reduced.
Yeah.
And
so you found yourself in a spot of being oversubscribed, right?
Yes.
Too much going on, too many plates. And
Yep.
so you dialed that back. Now, you only have the Mosquito Squad franchise and Sterling Lighting.
Well, yes. And then I have like a little thing going on in Puerto Rico, but that's, I'm the only one.
You can't help it. You're like a hobby guy. All right. We're going to have a business. Okay. But now you've gone, you were kind of at that 3 million mark. Now you've grown past that.
Yeah.
We're a few years past the point where you were getting stuck. And so combined, those businesses are past the 10 million mark, and you're still growing.
Yeah. No, I mean, and like within Sterling, like we've, had pretty consistent 25% year-over-year growth rates. Again, I think it has to do with being intentional and focused, and just, because I think as like one of the challenges as you're growing is like it's very hard to, especially for an entrepreneur, is to implement the systems and processes to hold people accountable. Mm. And so what ends up happening as you're focused on this other thing, all of a sudden you come back around and you're like, hey, what have you been doing? Like, and then you start,
what's going on over here?
Oh no, you haven't been doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then trying to implement, structure and accountability where you didn't have that. I think that's probably been one of my big lessons over the past like couple years of our growth, that, one, it's very difficult to, once an employee hasn't had that structure and accountability, they look at it as being this punishment that you're imposing upon them. And then so it's very, like, I have not been very successful in trying to turn that around. But it's been a learning lesson, and, really trying to personally be much more structured, and so that I can disseminate the accountability that needs to be there. Because if I'm not doing it, then nobody else is.
Well, I know you've learned tons of lessons over the past several years that we've known each other. I don't want to focus. I mean, we can't focus on all of them, but maybe if you were to distill it down into 2 or 3 key things that you learned individually as a leader, and or things that you had to implement in the business to enable you to grow past some of those sticking points in the growth journey. What would you point to as this thing really made a difference for me in my own growth journey?
I think, the one that kind of pops in my head first is, and I actually find myself telling people all this all the time, is that, adversity is fun with friends. And the idea that behind that is that, it's not that, the adversity like is enjoyable, or that it's like, you're looking forward to it. But when you go through these very trying experiences, when you have a friend that you get to go through it with, one, it makes it, that adversity more tolerable. You're not going to enjoy it, but it's more fun than if you didn't have that, because it would be extremely lonely and discouraging, like if you didn't have that friend to go through it with. And so, and for me, like, that friend, happens to be like my business partner, Patrick, and some key managers as well. But where we get to go through this, and then all of a sudden your bonds that you get to forge with these friends as you go through this thing that's really, really hard. One of my favorite books is like The Hard Thing About Hard Things, because it's like, there's no good answer. It's like, but it's just that, and sometimes all the answers are very bad answers, but you have to pick one as the leader. And it just makes it so much easier when you can do that with, go through that with somebody. And so I think that would be one of the, key takeaways I tell to, like new business owners, that, it's just, you have to have friends, that you can kind of experience, these challenges, because it's like, there's always like, you're gonna run out of money at some point and go like, oh, I made some really bad decisions. And it's just like, that's very hard. It's like your key employee leaves you and you are so stressed. And if you have somebody that you can kind of walk with you through that, and at least even just bouncing ideas, and, it just is so helpful.
So that kind of speaks to the point of surrounding yourself with people who are going to share your values. You didn't use that language right now, but you talked about having the one value of get by earlier. But now yes. I know you have a set of values that you guys live by. But when you surround yourself with these people who share your values, they share a passion for the purpose, this exciting thing that you're up to, not just turning a crank to make a buck, but we're making a difference. And if those people really belong with the purpose and they fit with the values, then you can have these foxhole moments. We used to call them foxhole moments, where firefight's going on and we're bonding through this adversity, because they are somebody I would want to sit in a foxhole with.
Right.
So that's really cool. What else? If we were to share another key learning for those who are maybe bumping up against some of those challenges, how did you stop being the bottleneck, Damien? Like that's a common occurrence.
Stopped.
Well, all right. Yeah. How did you dial that back? Right, because a lot of business owners face that one. They struggle to let go or bring in the right people or whatever it is for them. How did you do it, or what do you try to do?
So it's funny. I end up quoting Clayton because he was so influential in me when I'm going through those growth phases. But he was just like, I liked what he said about, entrepreneurship is an exercise in the act of letting go. And, that's been one of the, the challenges, or one of the things that I feel like I've done better than, like if you were comparing me to people, it's like, I have been very intentional about trying to one, coach people, and then, but allow them to make mistakes, and do things, because it's like, that is how I learned. And so it's a little bit unreasonable of me to go like, all right, I'm going to entrust you with this responsibility and then expect you never to make any mistakes, because I'm always very forgiving of myself when I make mistakes, but it's always a little harder when you see somebody else make that mistake and you're like, I wouldn't have done that. But, trying to dial that back and, allow, those people that you trust, to, take on more and more responsibility, but then at the same time rewarding them, for taking on that responsibility. So like, I have, Olivia, in Mosquito Squad, and she's, she really does, like, really all we talk about is like, I'm thinking about doing this. And I was like, that's probably what I would have done too. And so, we kind of have those coaching moments, but for the most part, she makes, the bulk of, 90% of the decisions that need to be made now. Which again, that just frees me up to, think on and make the decision. Because like thinking actually is pretty, energy intensive. Like it takes it out of you if you're going to be intentional and really think. And so letting go and having people take on responsibility has been probably one of the biggest, most impactful things. Cause like, apart from without Olivia doing, being, she's teachable, which is, be teachable is one of our core values. It's like, she's very teachable, takes instruction, implements that instruction, and, then strives to learn more and be better. And, so because of, if she wasn't doing that, like, I couldn't live in Puerto Rico without her, taking ownership, which is another one of our core values. And so it's just like, ultimately, like every time I think about Olivia, I'm like, oh, she is a core value fit.
And so it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've had to work at it, but the more you're able to organize the work enough to hand it off to somebody else, and then maybe even more importantly, be okay with them having a learning curve, having to make mistakes, because you and I made mistakes as we're learning. We still make mistakes. I don't know why I use the past tense on that.
Right.
You and I make mistakes. And so as we're letting other people own stuff, we got to be okay with even costly mistakes sometimes, as long as they are a fit with the values, as long as they truly belong here. It's okay. We're all going to make some mistakes. Yep. Let's just not make the kind that puts the business out of business. Right? If they're manageable, then we can keep growing and learning together. So, all right, very good. Probably have time for one more. And if I could steer this a little bit. So you've talked about the importance of values to an extent, like getting the right people to be in the foxhole with you or facing the adversity. You talked about really relinquishing control, like truly giving ownership to others and letting them try and, live through trial and error. Is there any sort of structure or process in the business itself that helped you to be able to do more working on the business and not just working in it? Is there anything that you learned that would help you kind of get above the day-to-day, besides letting go more, that just helped you get more organized, more strategic in your investing?
So, I think one of the things I learned was just that the amount of capital that your business really needs on hand, it's like, is a lot bigger than what you initially would think. I kind of like, my personal rule of thumb, like in the service-based business, is like, ideally I'd like 20% of whatever my gross sales are in cash on hand, and or cash equivalents.
So let's get real specific with that. 20% of the monthly sales number, or 20% of the annual sales number?
Well, because we're in a seasonal business, and so I do, in this business, I do it on an annual basis. So like, if you're doing $4 million, like I like to have about $1 million of cash or cash equivalents ready, or 800,000, at my disposal, just because it's, I've I've gone the route where it's like, all right, we have 5%. And all of a sudden you're making decisions based on how much cash you have. And then you can't take a risk and go like, hey, I'm going to hire this person to have this redundancy in place personnel wise, because you're so concerned what am I going to do with payroll? So I think, being intentional about your capitalization, the capitalization of your business, which that's what I failed to do in 2017, which led to a not great year in 2018.
And that's exactly why that one's popping to mind for you, right? It's like, sometimes we talk about this as don't run out of cash, right?
Yes.
When we're being in a more proactive stance, we talk about it as secure fuel for growth or get the resources that we need, right?
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is the fuel that we need or the resources that we need are typically more than you think they will need to be. And I also heard you say, without using these words specifically, that it's much better to come from a place of being able to make an investment decision instead of a decision driven by scarcity or like, how much is this going to cost me? Or like, do we have enough cash in the bank to make this decision?
Yeah. I mean, because like in, my example, we were making, let's postpone advertising, which, it's like, hey, that's, which cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales, which then affected renewal rates in the future. And, so who knows, not spending that, 150,000 or whatever it was, probably cost us, $1 million or more dollars,
in future
going down in the future. Yeah. And so that was a huge lesson. And then also just like anytime you're having to go to an employee and just saying like, hey, I've got to cut your pay, like that sucks. Yeah. And, I'm like, I don't ever want to have to go do that again. Like, so it's like, I mean, maybe I err on the side of trying to be, too conservative on, cash on hand, but it's like, I sleep a lot better at night, just trying to be more, making sure that we're well capitalized, because then it makes it easier to delegate, and, you have redundancies in place, and it's like, you can take decisive action quickly, when you are. It's just because I did operate for a long time, like, in the early years where I was like, hey, I've got all this money, let's buy houses. And then going like, oh, we've got mortgages and we have no cash. And like, it was just terrible. So
it was learning. Let's just call it learning.
It was, paying tuition.
Yeah. Well, I could go on and on talking with you about all these lessons, Damien. We better wrap it up though. Let me try to summarize. I think I heard you say, surround yourself with people that you can be in the foxhole with, which means you need to be a little intentional around why we're doing this and how we operate and who's a good fit for the team. Mm-hmm. We also said, hey, once we have those people, we got to practice letting go. We got to practice relinquishing control to them. Let's give them clear responsibilities, and then let's actually let them do the thing, including any lessons that they have to learn along the way. And then the last thing, which is a really important lesson for all of us, is that we don't want to be in a place where our cash position is keeping us from being able to invest in the growth of our business, where we're operating out of scarcity instead of having a real investment, ROI-driven kind of mindset. So all super valuable. Thank you for sharing those lessons, Damien. If people want to learn more about Sterling Lighting, about Mosquito Squad, or just connect with you online via social, what's the best way for them to do that?
So sterling-lighting.com takes you to our website, shows all our fixtures. We have a blog that I regularly contribute to now. And if you're in the DC area in need of mosquito control, it's like DC Mosquito Squad. And I think my Twitter handle is like Rad5C, and I'm on our Facebook groups and for Sterling Lighting on Facebook, and I think those are all my social medias that
All right. Yeah, that's good. Sterling-lighting.com is a great place to go learn about what Damien and Patrick and team are doing over there. And then you can look them up. Damien Sanchez. Loved having you on the show. Thank you for being here, Damien.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right. For those of you listening, please like, share, just make sure more seven-figure business owners hear this podcast, because we're going to keep bringing on great guests like Damien, who've been in the trenches or who've been in those foxholes that we talked about today. And we want to give you whatever tips and insights will help you in your own seven-figure growth journey. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Elite Entrepreneurs Podcast with your host, Brett Gilliland. Be sure to leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. You may also want to visit our website, eliteentrepreneurspodcast.com, to find additional resources to grow your business from 7 figures to 10 million and beyond.